Hello, welcome back. This is Professor Young with you for part two of what will be 3 parts, looking at and covering the endocrine system. When we left off with the endocrine system, we were talking about the anterior pituitary, which is here in front of you, and we were discussing the fact that there are really 2 main divisions that we need to be concerned with today, the pars distalis and the pars tuberalis. And the third part, pars intermedia, is only present during fetal development. There was a question raised in class today about what the prefix or that first part of the term pars, what does that refer to? And after doing some digging, I found out that it simply means part or parts. And so that the anterior pituitary is divided into 3 pars or 3 parts. Pars or part distalis, pars or part tuberalis, and then the fetal development part, that being pars intermedia. And so that is what pars means. So I did look at that and reference that for you guys so you know. Keep in mind that the pars tuberalis are the blackened area located right around the infundibulum, so that is one part of the pars tuberalis. Here's the other part of the pars tuberalis, and that this larger area that is located right there, that whole area there would be the pars distalis. And again, I spent quite a bit of time today stressing the fact ad nauseum that the anterior pituitary, histologically speaking and structurally speaking, is not connected to the hypothalamus neurologically. It is not connected neurologically. Remember, it's not even histologically similar to the hypothalamus, as the anterior pituitary is derived embryologically from the pharynx. In fact, no, never mind. Scratch that thought. I was going to go somewhere else for that, but I'm not going to do it. The anterior pituitary is connected to the hypothalamus through the hypophyseal portal system. And that is what we're looking at here. Right up in this area here, of course, we have the hypothalamus. And then we've got this elongated area located right in here. I'm going to redo that. Located right in this area, which is, of course, the infundibulum. The hypothalamus will release hormones into the hypothalamal-hypophyseal portal system through the primary plexus. Now, the primary plexus is what is highlighted in purple, that being the primary plexus, or the primary capillary bed. And so the blood that is in the primary plexus is basically connected to neurons coming out of the hypothalamus. The hormones drain into the capillary beds, the primary plexus, and follows its way down from this area. It follows its way down into the secondary plexus. These venules carry the blood, which now have the hormones in them. The hormones are released and diffuse across the membranes or the covering of the anterior pituitary into the tissue. That is how the hypothalamus controls, if you would, the pituitary. Remember, we were talking today in class at the fact that even though we consider the pituitary to be the master gland, it is actually not in control of what it is doing. It is taking its cues, it's taking its signals from the hypothalamus. That based on what the hypothalamus is directing the pituitary to do, the pituitary is then responding. And that is the case here, especially within the anterior pituitary. It's taking its cues from hormones released through the hypothalamus, traveling down the primary plexus into the venules surrounding the anterior pituitary, known as the secondary plexus. The hormones come out, diffuse across the membrane, and into the anterior pituitary, where it will have regulatory control over what hormones is then set out. So we have hormones regulating the release of hormones, regulating the impact on specific glands throughout the body. It's important that you keep that in mind. As we look at this next picture, and this demonstrates it perfectly, as for what I was just talking about, if we pay attention right up in this area, the anterior pituitary area, you see right there, there's the neurons. The neurons they stop. They do not continue through, as compared to the neurons on the posterior pituitary side. Anterior pituitary, those neurons stop at the infundibulum. The hormones diffuse across into that portal system. They are delivered to the anterior pituitary that way. What we see on the posterior pituitary is a direct neurological, through neurons, a direct neurological connection between the hypothalamus and the posterior pituitary. So we have this difference, if you would, in the regulatory control. So the nerve fibers run the entire length from the hypothalamus down into the posterior pituitary. Coincidentally, that tract of neurons is what we call the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. And I will type that out just to make sure that you have it. I don't think I mentioned that today. So I am mentioning it now. The hypothalamo, hypophyseal, sorry, tract. Right, and so that is the fibers, the nerve fibers running from the hypothalamus down into the posterior pituitary. So the posterior pituitary looks histologically much different than what the anterior pituitary looks like. And really what it's doing is that it's storing hormones for release later on. And there's three key areas, actually two areas that I'm concerned with, but for the sake of lab, you might have mentioned the median eminence. I'm not sure, but if you did, good. If not, no biggie. But what you are basically looking at here is this area right in here. Of course, you've got your hypothalamus right here. Third ventricle is in there, and then you have your median eminence. The areas that I am more concerned about, for the purpose of our conversations, is it would be this area right in here, which is the infundibulum, and then the pars nervosa, which is basically that center area of the posterior pituitary. And so when you get a chance, go back into lab and check this out histologically. Make sure you can tell the difference. Also, the link on bookmarks is there as well. And you can pull up some really good slides that are going to show you, some images that are going to show you exactly what you're looking at here in this picture. Hormones that are involved. There are 8 hormones that are released from the hypothalamus, 6 that are going to regulate the anterior pituitary, 2 that are stored within the posterior pituitary. When we talk about the anterior pituitary, we have the option of those hormones either regulating release of hormones or inhibiting the release of hormones somewhere else in the body. And so you will see that as we go back and forth here. And so this diagram here, we are specifically concerned with This area right in here. That's the wrong area, I'm sorry. Right in here, that being the anterior pituitary. So we're talking about, again, how exactly, if we look up in this area, how exactly the neurons connect in with the capillary beds, that portal system, that hypophyseal porter system. Lost my train of thought. Oh, and how those hormones get down in there. The hormones that are being released from the hypothalamus. And again, right up in here in this area, there's your hypothalamus, that area right in there. The hormones that are being released from the hypothalamus include the gonadotropin-releasing hormone, thyrotropin-releasing hormone, corticotropin-releasing hormone, prolactin-inhibiting hormone, PIH, growth hormone-releasing hormone, and somatostatin, which we don't really deal too much with, but it is one of the 6 that are released. Those 6 that are released and that end up down here in the anterior pit, those 6 hormones will oversee the release of such hormones as follicle-stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, thyroid-stimulating hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, prolactin, and growth hormone. And so, do you need to know this? Yes. Hint, hint, wink, wink, as I said in class today. This will be a part of your exam. You need to be able to identify the hormones that are released from the hypothalamus and the hormones that are being released from the anterior pituitary, and which hypothalamic hormones are regulating which anterior hormones. So you do need to make sure that you know that. So spend some time studying that. To help you out with that, we do have a nice little slide here that kind of helps us understand and see who is regulating who along the way. So gonadotropin-releasing hormone, GnRH, has the privilege, I guess you could say, of regulating FISH and LH, follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. We know that follicle-stimulating hormone is there to oversee the growth and development of ovaries and sperm production, while luteinizing hormone is going to oversee ovulation and testosterone secretion. So, kind of pay attention to this. All right, whereas FISH is going to oversee the growth of ovaries and sperm. All right, so ovary production, egg production, sperm production. Luteinizing hormone, LH, is going to, for us, oversee the process of ovulation and testosterone. Okay, and I know I spelled ovulation wrong. I noticed it after I hit enter. Ovulation and testosterone, those processes and or release of hormones. The two go hand in hand. If you're going to have maturation within the ovaries, you're going to have to be prepared for ovulation because that's going to be a release of the egg. If you want sperm to produce and mature, then you need to have testosterone present. So gonadotropin-releasing hormone is, if that is released from the hypothalamus into the anterior pituitary, you can bet that it's going to be then telling the anterior pituitary you need to release FSH and LH, and you can see right where, as soon as those two hormones enter into the bloodstream, where are they going? They're going to the ovaries, and they're going to the testes. No doubt about it. We have GHIH, which is going to be growth hormone inhibiting hormone and or thyroid releasing hormone. TRH, and that's going to oversee thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone is going to be released again from the anterior pituitary, go to the thyroid, and voila, guess what hormone it's going to release or cause the release of? Thyroid hormones, T4, T3. Again, GHIH and TRH are going to be released from the hypothalamus down the portal system into the anterior pituitary, where it will stimulate the release of TSH to go to the thyroid to release thyroid hormone. CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone, is going to have a direct impact on adrenocorticotropin hormone, or ACTH. That would be adrenocorticotropic hormone. So corticotropin releasing hormone is going to have an impact on adrenocorticotropic hormone. ACTH is going to travel to the adrenal glands, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few. PIH, prolactin inhibiting hormone, and TRH, thyroid releasing hormone, are going to both play a role with prolactin, which we talked about in class. We know prolactin, and I apologize for the phone ringing, but prolactin we know is specifically used in response to lactation, milk production. PIH is going to inhibit the release of prolactin, whereas TRH is going to promote the release of prolactin. And then we have, finally, GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone, which is going to allow the secretion of growth hormone. And growth hormone then is going to go into the tissues, specifically the liver, the bone, cartilage, muscle, and it also will stimulate some fat production as well. At any point in time, if you need to stop this, back it up, and re-listen to a slide, remember you are more than welcomed to do that and strongly encouraged to do that. Posterior pit, we said that they are in charge of overseeing, if you would, the storage of hormones for later release. So when the hypothalamus releases ADH, antidiuretic hormone, and oxytocin, it's going to release it into the posterior pituitary, where it will store it. And then, when needed, the posterior pituitary will release antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Different scenario than what we saw with the anterior pituitary. Those 6 key hormones that are released from the hypothalamus go to the anterior pituitary to cause the release of another hormone. The hypothalamus releases these two specifically, in particular, these two hormones into the posterior pit, where they are stored for later release. And you can see there exactly what they are regulating. Now, what I want to spend a little bit of time on is making sure that you understand the negative feedback systems that are involved with this process. And so, what is going to stop the pituitary and or the hypothalamus from releasing these hormones? Because if we don't look at it from this perspective of what stops it, we can then assume incorrectly that these hormones are just going to continue to release, and that's not what happens. So if we follow here, the hypothalamus, we know, is going to release, in this case here, since we're talking about thyroid releasing hormone and thyroid stimulating hormone, it's going to release thyroid releasing hormone down into the anterior pituitary. From the anterior pituitary, the thyroid releasing hormone is going to control the release of thyroid stimulating hormone, as we already mentioned. which will then release or be released into the circulatory system and travel its way to the thyroid. The thyroid will then release thyroid hormone, TH, where it will go ahead and travel to its target organs, wherever that may be throughout the body. We don't care about that. That's separate from what we want to know. What we want to know is, how does the hypothalamus and the pituitary know to stop releasing TRH and TSH respectively? It's a negative feedback system. Small amounts of TH will go ahead and travel to anterior pit as well as the hypothalamus. And when levels of TH reach a critical level, a threshold level, it acts as a switch that turns off the release of TRH and TSH. Once TRH has stopped being released, it's no longer present within the anterior pituitary, which means TSH is stopped from being released into the thyroid. Once TSH is no longer in the thyroid or at low levels, thyroid hormone TH stops being released. Once that stops being released, the levels of it goes down in the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary. Once those levels reach a certain level of not being there, anterior or the hypothalamus releases TRH into the anterior pit. Anterior pit releases TSH, which travels to the thyroid. Thyroid hormone the thyroid begins to release thyroid hormone, and everything starts over again. And so that's one example of the negative feedback. Here's another example of a negative feedback system with low blood glucose and high blood glucose. So low blood glucose is going to stimulate the release of growth hormone releasing hormone, which is then going to go down, in this case, into the anterior pituitary, which is then going to follow the progression that you see there. When the blood glucose levels are high, it's going to stimulate the release of growth hormone inhibiting hormone. And you can see that there. Again, each of these systems kind of act as a negative feedback system in regulating itself. In this case, you are monitoring blood glucose levels. This here, you can just kind of look at this. This may be on the exam, it may not, but you might want to know this as an example. Corticotropin releasing hormone, CRH, in the hypothalamus is released into the anterior pituitary, where it allows for the continued release of the adrenocorticotropin hormone. Adrenocorticotropin hormone then travels to the adrenal cortex, where cortisol is released. And once cortisol is released, certain amounts of that is going to travel back to the hypothalamus and the anterior pit to shut down, if you would, the release of either corticotropin releasing hormone or adrenocorticotropin hormone, respectively. Here we see the pineal gland. We've been talking a lot about the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. We do have to talk a little bit about the pineal gland, just because if we didn't, we wouldn't be doing it just service. The pineal gland itself is in charge of releasing melatonin. Melatonin is a derivative, if you would, of serotonin, and both of these hormones work to develop sleep patterns. And so, at nighttime, when the sun goes down, their levels are respectively higher. And the higher the levels of melatonin, the more sleepy and the better night's rest you get. And so that's about it with that. Not much there. The pineal gland is there. That's what it does. It releases melatonin, and it goes on from there. But it is critical in sleep cycles. It's typically this gland where they start to look for people who go through the winter depression because of the night and darks, the increase in nighttime presence during the fall and winter. People tend to get sleepier. They tend to get more depressed, and it has to do with the levels of serotonin and melatonin. So that can all be regulated. The thymus, you can see the difference. We talked a little bit about this today in class. The thymus in a newborn versus the thymus in an adult. It does shrink by about 75% over time, and that is one of the reasons for that is because the thymus is specifically in charge of immune response development, as well as metabolism, or some effects with metabolism. And so we see during the critical ages of development, thymus is larger within the newborn and shrinks, again, about 75% or so within the adult. We'll talk more about immune response and immune development once we get into the immune system. So we're not going to get into that all too much right now, but we will. We will. Thyroid gland, right here. The thyroid is the largest gland within adults. Thyroid gland is the largest gland within adults. And it is in charge of secreting T4 and T3 cells, the thyroid hormones. We just looked at this feedback system that initiates this, so I'm not going to spend any more time on that. You should be aware of that. And we'll kind of leave it at that. But there's the information. I'm not going to give you much more than what is on there. It's not much more than what hasn't already been said. So this was a quick little overview. And I apologize for the hurriness of this. But again, it's all things that have been pretty straightforward and we have discussed at some length within lecture. As you review this, as you review your notes, and as you're working on the homework questions, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Or, of course, as you're finding during class, I'm willing to answer questions as you have them. And so jot them down at home, come into the next lecture, and feel free to ask away. And as of this time, this is Professor Young saying goodbye. And again, as always, shoot me an email, ask me questions, and best of luck.